I know this is a Latino event, but I'm a Polish American, and we went through similar immigration experiences, so I share a lot of your points. But the point I want to make is context shapes opportunity, shapes legacy. And I'm just thinking about my own experience, I think the 1900s to the 1970s, that time period, shaped by an industrial world where people had to work hard, it was machine discipline for people, sweat and calluses, the whole thing that we look at. And you ask yourself, you know, multi-ethnic neighborhoods, the growth was about internal growth in the United States. There was definitely ethnic areas, neighborhoods, but there was hierarchy, there was prejudices that existed among quote-unquote white people at the time, you know, there was ladders, all that stuff. Given that, there was a legacy that was left to people who grew up in that experience. Then I look at 1980s to now. What you have is a service economy. We moved away from industrialization. 70% of the jobs are now services. It's an information and a high-tech economy. Very different than a machine economy. 24/7 office discipline, not machine discipline, but 24/7 customer-driven, you know, Twitter-driven, whatever it is, discipline required. Fast-paced, multitasking. Assimilation now is not, in the old days it was, you had to assimilate to America. I had to give up my Polish legacy, quote unquote. I had to earn it. We had to do it ourselves in our own local churches. We kept our legacy through churches. We didn't do it. We didn't expect the state to do it or anybody else to protect our legacies. We had to do it ourselves. But the issue is today the assimilation is less. Multiculturalism, differentiation, and identity assertion seems to be what we're going through now in terms of trying to struggle with what's going on. So the question I ask you is, what legacies is this group going through these 1970s to now going to be leaving in the future? Because legacy is the theme here. Given what the industrial legacy left for a lot of us, which I think Eduardo, what you were talking about, is very much from that era, what does new legacy leave?
You know, you should be sitting up here. That's a great question, and I hope I can get at your legacy and how everything has evolved. And you know, isn't it interesting when we started talking about in the 90s and even in the late 80s, and we started talking about these emerging markets. Okay, well, I was in Philadelphia for 3 years, and we had more Polish there than we do Hispanics in Philadelphia. And I love the food too. It's good. But
I grew up there, by the way.
did you?
Yeah.
Okay. Where you're from. So the interesting thing today is when I'm looking at the legacies and how they're going to differ, because one, it was assimilation. What's happened today, though, is these little emerging markets are no longer little markets. Okay, they are the market. Okay, and some of the communities, and I'm looking when I place agents who I want to go in and grow in a marketplace. Okay, I go into one marketplace, and let's say it's Paramount. All right, Paramount, 85% Latino. Okay, I go into Monterey Park, 87% Asian, mainly Chinese. See, so what's happened is these communities now are forcing us as corporate America and as business people to service them the way they want to be serviced in their language and all the things that they want to do for themselves, because these communities are now millions of people. I mean, it's just not, okay, let's assimilate, let's do this, and that was the legacy. It's different now. So the legacies that I see in the future will be very international. I see us becoming, I think in the next 20 years, you know, because you go to LA school districts now, I think there's like 120 languages spoken. Okay, and the customer is going to force and is going to create whatever legacies they want for corporate America and the businesses today. So we're really into a great world ahead of us, which is going to be pretty exciting. You got to get on the brand, but that's just my philosophy as I look at Los Angeles and I look at the rest of the country.
no, and I think what you hit on is a really important point, that in some ways we may have an advantage here by serving ethnic communities and immigrant communities here. It's going to prepare us to handle the global world. Because the focus is not towards American growth anymore, generated by American markets. It's going to be American growth partly, and a lot generated by external markets. So that the extent that we can learn to work with multiculturalism well, along the line that you're talking about, will be really very important. And the question therefore is, are Latinos better capable of doing this than others?
I don't think there's any question that by us looking at ourselves and looking at the richness that diversity offers in this country, and really an appreciation of that'll make us more competitive in the global marketplace. There's no question about that to me. I mean, somebody who understands Latin culture and somehow provides that insight into a company, sales or marketing strategy, ultimately is going to make that company much more competitive.
Sure.
So I think and your point is well taken. Those little markets are no longer little markets; they're big markets, and they're big markets that are spread across the world. And we can be much more competitive by celebrating our diversity in this country.
But when you said prepare, the only thing I will say this, and I'll be quiet on that, I'm sorry, is I think we need to educate ourselves. Okay? And the education piece frightens me. Okay? Because the dropout rate is just tremendous in this area. Okay, so are we prepared for it? Do we have the work ethic for it? Yes. Do we have the opportunity? Yes. But do we have the education base that's going to sustain this next baby boomer generation is what this Hispanic market is. And if we're going to control the wealth of this country, we got to educate ourselves.
And I think too, just to couple that, we're no longer, I think America's finally waking up to the idea that we have all these different communities. I think, as we've all said, there was a time of assimilation, and it was just kind of the melting pot, and everybody was supposed to like Brand X because Brand X is what fit everybody's world. And now we are wanting to have a little salsa or a little barbecue or a little whatever to the mix. And so, when you see things like general market issues that salsa outsells, this is an old statistic, but salsa outsells ketchup as the #1 condiment, while I think America's finally embracing, if you will, her multiculturalism that has always existed through pockets of community that have always, there's Polish communities all over the place in Chicago and so on and so forth. But we haven't really been open to that idea until most recently.
Good time for one more quick question.
Wasn't a question, it's more just a comment, sort of backing up on what you were saying. Is as Latinos, there's two unifying things. One is we all speak the same language, right? The other one is the family, that family structure that we have. Where the other emerging markets, the Asians, they're Asian, but there's 10, 20 different dialects within the Asian community. Indians, the same thing. So the Indian, it's very large emerging market from an exportation and from an economic development, but yet within India there's also 30 or 40 different languages. So I think just as Latino leaders, the one thing that embraces that's going to help us continue to succeed is the language and that family support that we all have.
So, and celebrating that,
Absolutely.
Hispanidad.
Yeah.
Celebrating that Hispanidad, which is, we've seen it in the United States. I mean, our population is growing since 2000. It's grown 47%, and the general market has grown 6 or 7%. We have to wrap it up. One thing I'll leave everybody with, and I think my colleagues here will endorse this idea, which is I am firmly convinced that the only way that we're going to be able to leave a legacy is by leaving a mark. You've got to make that mark before you leave that legacy, and I think it's everyone's responsibility here to make that mark and